Thank you. Oh, so switch this on, I think.
Yeah, we better do a mic check. We're getting the nod.
There we go. Something came on.
Can everybody hear us? Yes. Yeah, clearly.
Can you hear me?
Or are we
yeah.
Perfect.
Okay, great.
Wonderful.
Okay.
Okay. So, Callie, thank you for the introduction. I'm really not sure how she persuaded, or whether it was just that she browbeat poor Patsy, because John has been doing an amazing world tour, and we were just talking about some of the places he's been to. So Lima in Peru, and he's going off to Bali.
Like Paddington?
Yes, like Paddington. Going up to Bali for one of his next big tours. So little old Earls Barton has done pretty well to get this gentleman here. So for those of you who may not be aware, John has written 18 adult books. This might be out of date, so tell me if I'm wrong. 18 adult books, 7 books for young readers, 2 novellas, and a short story collection.
Yes.
Yeah. You've got 4 Irish Book Awards. You have the Gustav Heinemann Peace Prize for The Boy in the Striped Pyjamas, amongst other things. So fantastic. Safe to say that words and books in all their glory are really important to John, just like they are for us here in Earls Barton Library. How important for you was Dundrum Library when you were young?
Dundrum Library. Well, before I answer that question, firstly, let me just say thank you all for coming out here tonight, and thank you for inviting me. And I do have to say, though, that in 25 years of doing festivals and doing events, this is the first time I've ever gone somewhere where going onto the stage, I've been given a glass of Prosecco.
Yay! So, we're winning.
It's a good start. So yeah, I grew up in Dublin, and down the road from the house that I grew up in and my parents still live in, was a beautiful Carnegie Library in Dundrum. And it was a huge part of my childhood. We used to get a half day from school every Wednesday, and my mum would take my brother and my sister and myself to the library, and we'd get out 3 books every week. And because of the vintage that I am, we didn't have computers and phones and streaming services and all that sort of stuff. So like books and reading were just the most important thing to me. And from a very young age, from that very young childhood age, I think I was a writer very young. I loved taking characters from stories that I was reading, from books I was reading, and writing new stories for them. And I found this with other writer friends over the years. I had a sort of a fetish for stationery, for really nice paper and pens, and I loved that. I still. What happened was I'd written a lot of very long books, very long novels, and I wanted to challenge myself to write something quite short. So I thought, I wanted to write the length of each of these, like a 40,000 word book. And really, in my head, I sort of envisioned it like, like a wet rag, and you're squeezing it and like getting all the water out of it, and no pun, water, but to make it as tight as possible. So I had the idea for the novel that became Water, and I was about halfway through it when the idea for The Four came to me. So I was writing this one book, and it was about somebody who was questioning. She travels from Dublin to one of the Aran Islands off the west coast of Ireland for a year to question whether she enabled her husband to commit these terrible crimes that he committed. She doesn't know whether she has or she hasn't. She needs to kind of interrogate herself. So I was halfway through the first draft of that when I thought to myself, actually, there's a way to turn this into something bigger, which isn't just one novel. So I completed a draft of the elements: water, earth, fire, and air. So I presented that then to my editor, my publisher, and said to him, this is what I'd like to do. I'd like to write about sexual abuse, but from 4 different standpoints: an enabler, somebody who's complicit, somebody who commits the crime, and somebody who is a victim. But that they would all be standalone stories, different crimes that have taken place, but that the narrator of each one would be a minor character from the previous one. So that was my plan. But I gave him the draft of Water with the idea for the four books, and he said, yeah, great, yeah, go for it. So off I went, and I started. I rewrote Water. I was doing the drafts on that. Started thinking about Earth, and it was my idea to do it every 6 months. I liked the idea of it sort of like not taking years and years. I wanted it to be bang, 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 bang. Just get them out there, And that was a challenge in its way as well, of course, because I published the first one before I even had the idea for what the storyline of number 3 or 4 would be. Wow. But having committed to the project, I had to, I had to go with it, yeah. And I knew my delivery dates for each one in order to do it November, May.
Did you like that rigidity of your kind of process, though, or would you normally be much more free-flowing in your timings?
I'd probably be a bit more free-flowing usually, but I am very disciplined. And if I say I'll deliver something by a certain date, I will. I'm not, well, I wouldn't say, lazy would be the wrong word, because some people just some people just have a different process. When I start, I'm very focused. I get my way to the end, and I get the drafts done, I get it to my editor, I do the redrafts. I'm very focused and disciplined on things. So I never really questioned myself that I would get it done. But it was a different type of challenge, certainly.
Do you set yourself time each day to write, or do you kind of write nearly 12 hours if the juices are flowing, say?
Again, neither of those. Sorry.
Straight to.
Sorry. The way it works for me is it's more that what I like is to get to the end of a day and feel I haven't wasted a day, right? So it's not so much making sure I've written 4 hours or 6 hours or written X amount of words or anything. It's I'm up early. I'd usually be at my desk by 8 o'clock. I'll do a little bit of work. I'll go and read. I'll do the laundry. I'll do all the stuff that we all do. Just day to day, I'll go back in and do a bit more work. Read again. And by the end of the day, I like to just feel, when I go to bed, I want to feel that I've achieved something with that day, that whatever book I'm working on, I've got another few pages through it and it's moving along. But I'm not rigid in the sense of I've got to get this number of words done or anything, or I have to be there between 10 and 11.
No.
It's more sort of just getting the work done.
Cool. Two of the key characters in the Elements are female,
Yes.
Vanessa and Freya.
Mm-hmm.
How do you tap into that female psyche?
Well, it's not any different in a way than tapping into anything that I haven't been. I've written a lot of books that are set in the past. I've never been a First World War soldier.
True.
I've never been a bodyguard to a Russian Tsar. I wasn't alive during the Second World War. There's so many books I've written where I'm using my imagination. And I don't think imagining what it's like to be a woman is any more different than that.
No.
It's I know some women, and I've never known any of those other things. So I have a decent understanding of human nature and so on. And so I actually don't think it's as complicated as people think. And I'm surprised sometimes that male writers don't write more in female voices. I've written a few because I wrote a ghost story, This House is Haunted, around 2012. That novel, that was narrated by a woman. Water and Fire are, and I'm pretty sure All the Broken Places.
Yes.
Yeah, All the Broken Places, that's narrated by a woman. But I don't see a massive gender difference anyway in that sense. It's a character. I'm trying to understand the character, and whether they're a boy, a girl, a man, woman, whatever, isn't really that important to me as such.
Okay. And I guess the follow-up question to that is, and I hope this isn't too impertinent, given that your books are based on many of your own life experiences, was there a reason you chose Freya to be the predator in Fire?
Oh yeah, there was, because so firstly, as you mentioned, there's 4 narrators, and it goes girl boy, in that, well, woman man. But so I wanted 2 and 2, but I thought when I would get to the book that would be narrated by a perpetrator, somebody who is abusing kids, we've read a lot, obviously, about men who do that, and I've written about that. And I thought, you're looking as a writer for the stories that aren't told. Mm-hmm. And I'd noticed a lot in recent years, these stories that you would see in newspapers about, often it seems to be, you see a lot about teachers, female
yes.
teachers with sort of 15, 16-year-old boys. Mm-hmm. And the thing that always struck me about it, if I made the mistake of reading down through the comments or something, it would be, you would get these guys saying, I wish that had happened to me when I was 15. And it's, you shouldn't wish that. There is no difference between a young girl being abused and a young boy being abused. Mm-hmm. That perhaps the boy would, in that moment, would feel, I want to do this, but he could get to 20, 25, 30, he could get to 50, and it could have a huge emotional impact on them. And the guy who says, I wish that had happened to me, would probably be the first person out with the pitchforks if their own 15-year-old daughter or 14-year-old daughter was abused by a teacher. So I thought it was important to tell a story that way, that what about a woman doing this? What would drive a woman to do this? And what is the effect on the boys in the book? Because there's 2 14-year-old boys in that book. And every 14-year-old boy is different, just like every 14-year-old girl is different. And that one 14-year-old boy might be sort of ready to go with that, and another 14-year-old boy might just not have the emotional resources at all. He mightn't be ready till he's 18, till he's 20, for that sort of thing to happen in his life. And I just thought it was important to recognize that boys can also be victims of sexual abuse.
Thank you. Are Vanessa and Evan both complicit in the abuse? Do you believe that individuals who observe abuse and neglect and do nothing are as bad as the perpetrators themselves?
Well, I do believe that, because I think if you see a crime happening in front of you and you don't do anything to stop it, you are part of that crime. There's no question. In the first book, it's more complicated, I think, because it's in the second book, I don't want to spoil it if anybody hasn't read it yet, but we do get an answer at the end of the second book of how complicit he's been. In the first one, she just doesn't really know. No. She she's been married to this man for 25 years or something. He's been convicted of these crimes. And she's spending this year thinking, how do you live with somebody for 25 years and not really know who they are? How do you sleep next to somebody for 25 years and not know who they are? And she's trying to figure that out. You know, I have my own idea of her, of whether she knew or she didn't, but I almost don't think it's my place to say it. I think it's for the reader to decide for themselves. Yeah. Whereas in the second book, we do know, we do find out towards the end whether he is culpable or not.
Okay. Good question. How are we doing for time? I'm just wondering whether it would be a good time for you to read a little bit from there.
So this is just a short section from the opening of the last volume that's just come out now, Air. So this is narrated by Erin, who's 40 in this book, and well, actually, it's from the opening chapter, so I don't really need to give you any intro, but this is it. In an ideal world, I would be spending my 40th birthday in a bar overlooking Bondi Beach, a beer in my left hand, a woman I love by my right, while friends tease me about my receding hairline. Instead, I'm standing near Gate 10 in Sydney Airport, preparing for 20 hours in the air, with only a recalcitrant teenage boy for company. But who among us lives in an ideal world? Granted, it's early in the morning, but I'm disproportionately irritated when I emerge from the gents to find that Emmett is not seated where I left him, his bright yellow backpack abandoned on a chair next to my own. I look around, my gaze darting between sleepy-eyed passengers, cleaning staff and airline crew, all making their way through the concourse. It's not the first time I've lost my son. When he was 5, I let go of his hand for a moment in David Jones on Castlereagh Street, and it was almost 30 minutes before I found him again, sitting in a corner of kitchenware with the patience of an obedient puppy, his cheeks streaked with tears, but hopeful that his master will return sooner or later. Most parents are at their most protective when their children are infants, but I'm the opposite, having become increasingly vigilant since he turned 14 a few months ago. I can't help myself. I know the dangers out there for boys his age. A moment later, he appears from behind me. He must have followed me into the bathroom and used one of the cubicles. What? He asks when I glare at him. I asked you to wait with the bags. He rolls his eyes. If this gesture was ever to become an Olympic sport, he'd be Australia's #1 hope. Can I get some chocolate? He asks. I didn't have any breakfast. You said you weren't hungry. Yeah, because you got me out of bed at 3 o'clock in the morning. Of course I wasn't hungry. I made sure we had everything packed by yesterday afternoon, so there'd be nothing for either of us to do but take quick showers when the alarms went off. But the taxi still picked us up from North Bondi at 3:30. Neither of us uttered a word on the way to the airport. Emmett wearing completely superfluous sunglasses, along with the AirPods that have become my mortal enemy. But it's important not to get the day off to a bad start. We're going to be in each other's company for an extended period, and if we're going to survive this trip without killing each other, then it's down to me, as the adult, to adapt to my son's mood swings. Fine, I say, leading him towards a relay, where he loses himself before a wall of processed sugar. He's always had a sweet tooth, but never seems to put a pound on. I make my way towards the magazines, where I pick up a copy of GQ, a crossword book, and the Sydney Morning Herald, scanning the headlines quickly. Turning away, my eyes land on a table holding a selection of the latest fiction, and at its centre is a pile of the new novel by Furia Flight. A miniature cardboard cutout of the author is propped up, showing her with her head turned coquettishly to the left, an enigmatic smile on her face. She's dressed entirely in white, which only accentuates the blackness of her skin, and her arms are wrapped around her body. Something in the pose seems a little strained, as if she's uncomfortable connecting her beauty to her work, but has been convinced to do so. It only happens with women, she told me once, when I quizzed her about the machinations of the publishing industry. Maybe because all the men are ugly, I suggested, and she shook her head, listing 4 or 5 male novelists who she considered handsome. None of whom I had ever heard of, but who I looked up online afterwards to see what they wore, how they styled their hair, how they presented themselves to the world, looking for tips as to how to model myself on them, so that she might fall for me as I fell for her. Studying their author pictures and the pained expressions on their faces as they stared into the middle distance, looking for all the world as if someone had asked them to explain Fermat's last theorem. They seemed more constipated than anything else. Being confronted by her image now, however, feels like a punch to the guts, a complicated blend of lingering desire and anger. Since its publication, I've done all I can to avoid Furia's book, which hasn't been easy as it's been heavily promoted. Her picture has appeared on the front page of weekend supplements, and driving into work, I've occasionally been forced to turn off the radio when she's been announced as a guest. I haven't even set foot in a Dimox since Christmas for fear of being confronted by it. Some masochistic urge now forces me to pick it up and read the blurb on the back. Then, looking around, I see Emmett standing from, and sure enough, he trots my way, holding it out like a peace offering. "Dad," he says, but I cut him off. There's no way I'm spending $80 on something so pointless. "No," I say. "But no, Emmett, there'll be plenty of pillows on the plane. Those things aren't even comfortable. They just look like they are." Over the tannoy, I hear an announcement that our flight will begin boarding shortly, and make my way towards the till, paying for more chocolate and gelatinous sweets than any human being should consume in a month. "And these," says Emmett, throwing in a party-sized bag of honey soy chicken crisps, enough to feed a family of 4. It's simpler just to buy what he wants. After all, I'm tired, I'm anxious, I'm undertaking a journey that might prove to be an enormous mistake. And yet, despite my early morning crankiness, as we head towards the gate, I feel a desperate desire to pull my son into an embrace, to press his body against my own, and explain to him how important the next few days will be for both of us. I can't, of course. If I even tried to touch him, he'd push me away in mortification. The truth is, he wouldn't even be here now if he'd had any choice in the matter, but he's still at an age where I have some semblance of authority over him. One final drama before we board. The security guard is standing by the seats we were occupying earlier, staring at our backpacks. For all the fuss I created about Emmett remaining with them, they slipped my mind when we went to the store. The guard, who looks as if he should be studying for his HSC, not in full-time employment, turns to me. "Are these your bags, sir?" he asks. "Yes," I say. "Sorry, I went to the bathroom, and then my son wanted something from Relay. I should have thought." The boy glances at Emmett. "Is this your father?" he asks. "I've never seen this man before in my life," says Emmett, and I roll my eyes. "Oh, for Christ's sake," I say. "He just came over and started talking to me," and Emmett, shut up. The guard looks from one of us to the other. He may be young, but he can probably see the resemblance between us. "Fine, he's my dad," says Emmett, chuckling a little, which at least makes me smile. "Can I see your passports?" asks the guard, and I take them from my back pocket and hand them across. He takes an eternity to compare the names and photos, and I'm this close to asking whether there's a problem. "You know you shouldn't leave bags alone like this," he asks eventually. "They're a security risk. Do you mind if I take a look inside them?" He asks the question politely enough, and I want to say yes, I do mind actually. But if I do, he'll probably summon a colleague, and before I know it, both Emmett and I will be taken to private rooms to be interviewed. 30 minutes later, our plane will be taxiing down the runway while we're left behind, and we simply cannot miss this flight. "I don't mind at all," I say, a fake smile plastered across my face, and he studies me for a moment before unzipping my rucksack. There's not much in there. My laptop, a printout of a paper I'm writing for a medical journal, a Lee Child novel, some breath mints. My irritation rises, however, when he reaches for Emmett's bag. This feels more like an intrusion, but thankfully my son's belongings are even less threatening than my own. "Just be aware next time," he says. "When bags are just slung around the place, they're a security risk." "That's what I told my dad," says Emmett, but he never listens. "Thank you," I say, making my way towards the boarding gate, where the woman behind the desk is now summoning business class passengers forward. "Sir," says the guard, and I turn around. "What?" I ask. "For heaven's sakes, what is it now?" "Haven't you forgotten something?" I frown, uncertain what he means, then realise that Emmett has returned to the very seat where I originally left him. He's put his AirPods in again and probably isn't even thinking about the time. I bark his name and he jumps up, obedient for once, and follows me. I feel a sense of relief when both our boarding passes scan without further incident. As we make our way along the gangway towards the plane itself, it occurs to me that he hasn't even wished me a happy birthday yet.
I read Air in less than 24 hours. and even that, it was that long because my family were interrupting. It was that sort of story. And personally, I felt, without wishing to blow smoke, that the end of the book is the most complete, well-rounded finish to any story I've ever written.
Okay, thank you.
Aaron describes himself as at one with myself, at one with the universe, and finally at one with the elements, which I think is a brilliant last line. Do you find your writing cathartic? I'm
not sure if cathartic is the word that I would use. What I find is that I can't live without writing.
No.
I can't live without books or reading, to be honest. That it's as important to me as breathing on any given day. I always have to have a book on the go, both one that I'm reading and one that I'm working on. You know, they said about apparently Anthony Trollope that when he finished a book in the evening, well, if he finished a book at like 4:30, he'd start the next book at 4:45.
Wow.
You know, and I wouldn't be quite that bad, but if I finish a book in the evening that I'm working on, that I'm writing, once I finish, I'm ready to start the next day. You know, I don't take time off.
It's like breathing.
Pardon?
It's like breathing.
It is. I don't take time off. I don't want time off. It makes me very happy, for one thing. I really enjoy the process of writing. I know how fortunate I am to be able to do it and to have an audience for it. So I don't take that for granted, but I enjoy it. It makes me happy. So I think there have been some stories that have had an element of catharsis. So these 4 books, because they're about abuse and because, you know, I've talked in interviews about some abuse I suffered in school, that has had an element of catharsis, sure, for me, and particularly, say, going on radio shows or something and talking, particularly back in Ireland, talking about that and about the people who committed those acts and the other people from my school who were victims of that. That has been good for me as a person. But I just think writing brings me joy and reading brings me joy. So, and that's the way I look at it.
Brilliant, thank you. That leads me on to my next question. What's the next project?
Well, I sometimes...
If you can tell us.
I won't tell you what it's about, but I'll tell you something, because I sometimes feel that every book that you write is almost a reaction against the previous one. And that if you take these 4 as one book, these are all short books, first person, contemporary, and quite dark. And what I'm writing at the moment is third person, historic, both funny and dramatic, and quite a long book. As long as, like, my longest book is Hearts of Visible Furies, which is 203,000 words, which I always like to say it's 2,000 words longer than Moby Dick. And the draft that I have of the book I'm writing at the moment is already 250,000.
Oh wow!
But my editor Bill has a very good red pen that, you know, will eventually make, you know, some stabs through that. But it's going to be a big long book. So it's I think in a way that when I got to the end of these 4, and having spent the last 2 years on these, it frees up a different part of the brain, right? So I was ready to write some jokes. I was ready to write the past. I was ready to the distance of a third person rather than the interiority of a first person. So that's what I'm working on at the moment. Because I guess I finished this, you know, you finished about like 8 months before. So I've been working on the next book since September, I think.
Fantastic. Yeah. Okay. Maybe we can open up the floor now if anybody has any questions they'd like to ask. I'm sure we'll have many.
Yes.
Oh, just on
we've
that
got a mic.
note.
Okay,
we do have a microphone so that the whole room can hear. So.
The front row.
Hi. You mentioned about your editor with the red pen.
Yeah.
How do you feel when you have submitted a piece of work and a lot of red marks come back to you, a bit like sort of, well, my friends here were all teachers, so we know how a red pen works.
Why do you use the phrase "a lot of red marks"? I actually work really well with an editor, and I've worked with my editor for about 20 years now. So we have, we trust each other. We both know that we are trying to get the best possible book. What I always say about him is, I send him a draft, and then I go over to London, and we meet. We go out, we have a couple of beers, and we talk about the book. And what I always say is the things he tells me that aren't working are things that at the back of my mind I've known aren't, and I've sort of been too lazy to fix, and I need somebody to say, you need to look at this or this character or this scene, And I'm like, yeah, I do. You're right. Yeah. And so I actually work really well, but I need that. I'm good with it, but I find I don't need it more than once or twice. That I will go away and I'll do a big rewrite, taking into account the things he has said. And I won't always agree with absolutely everything, not everything, but honestly 9 times out of 10, he's spot on. And I'll do another draft, and then he'll come back with just a few little bits, little small minor things here and there, and then that will usually be the end of it. But I think in a Nobel Prize winners work with an editor. There's nothing more irritating than reading sort of a debut novelist saying I don't want my work to be edited. I mean, for heaven's sakes, we're all human. Take advice. It'll make a better book. That's all anybody in editing wants to do, is make the best book possible.
Anybody else? Come on, guys, we've got 100 people in the room. There must be a few. Don't be shy.
Oh, thank you. Oh, is that right? I'm just interested in how you come up with your ideas, because I've just read Ladder to the Sky, and well, obviously, if you haven't read it, you won't know, but you all know what it's about, but other people might know.
I have read it.
Yeah, but I'm just wondering, because that book is about somebody who...
I think if you are reading and writing all the time, as I have been since I was about 8, I think your brain kind of changes a little bit, and you're always open to ideas. You're always conscious of things going on around you. I could be sitting here and something could just happen outside these big windows, and I'll take it in. And I keep a huge list of ideas, notes, of things. Most of those will never go anywhere, right? I won't have time for them in my life, but some of them will stay. And for example, what I was saying about the novel that I'm writing at the moment is an idea I had about 10 years ago, but I wasn't ready to write it. I was waiting I thought it was a good idea, but it just didn't feel right to me at that moment in my life to write it. And when I got to the end of these, it was kind of jumping up and down in my head and saying, this is the one to go next. So I just think I'm a bit like a sponge in that way. And I think the more you read and the more you write, then I never seem to struggle to get ideas.
Sorry.
You're a great reader yourself. What was your last 5-star read, and can you tell us about it?
Actually a debut novel a couple of months ago called Nesting by a woman called Roisin O'Donnell. Do you know it? Yeah. You just read it?
Yeah.
Wow, what a coincidence.
Great.
Yeah.
It was great.
I reviewed it for the Sunday Independent in Ireland, and I thought it was outstanding. It's about a woman who is she's being abused by her husband, not physically abused, coercive control. That's the phrase, isn't it? And it's about then, she leaves the family home and the housing crisis, and she's got these little kids and she's pregnant, and how she negotiates all that while the guy's trying to get her back and all that. And from what I've read from the interviews, I haven't met the Roisin O'Donnell, but from what I've read from the interviews, I think a lot of it comes from personal experience. And she has poured that into that novel, and it's a bloody good novel. I thought it was absolutely really fantastic. Yeah, right at the back
of the room, sorry.
If you want to shout it out, I can repeat it. Oh, okay. We got one there.
It's on the website.
I'm also a teacher, and we taught your novel Boyne in Striped Pyjamas for a very long time. And I suppose I have 2 questions. One, how do you feel about the fact that your works are taught and appreciated in that way, rather than just, I suppose we did read for pleasure, but we also read for analysis and evaluation. And also, how do you approach writing a young adult or child's novel versus an adult novel?
Okay. Well, firstly, thank you for using the book with your students. My feeling about it is it's a great privilege to have a novel that teachers choose to use with students, and that students then read and hopefully gain something from. The slight downside of it is that you must remember that novelists don't write books as educational tools. And some of the criticism that has come in more recent years towards Striped Pyjamas is because it is used so much in schools and so on. But as I've said about that criticism, I never asked anybody to. I'm not claiming it's a historical reference point. It's a novel. It's subtitled a fable. So, and I think teachers know that. Teachers do that when they talk to children about the book and say, this is not exactly the way the Holocaust was or how the camps were. But I'm very grateful for the fact that a whole generation of kids around the world have been using that. And hopefully it has sparked their interest enough to go on and read the better books, the Primo Levis, the Elie Wiesels, the Anne Franks, and so on. That, and sorry, the second part of the question was?
The difference between writing a children's book versus...
Oh yeah. Honestly, there isn't a huge difference. I've written 6 YA books and a picture book. And with the 6 YA books, I don't make the themes any easier. 3 of them are set during wartime, 2 of them are about sort of gender type issues, and 1 of them is about grief. So they're serious subjects. I don't make the language any simpler. All I really do is put a child at the center of the story and see the world through their eyes. I generally put a child in an adult experience way before they should be in that experience, because as we know, unfortunately, lots of children go through adult experiences, like say the death of a parent, way before they should. So I guess I approach it that way. I remember going to a school in Dublin one time with one of my kids' books, and they'd made a list of all the words they didn't know, and that they had like a classroom dictionary or something, and they were looking them up. And the list was, reasonably good size, and I thought, actually, that's good. I mean, you don't know what the word means? Sure, look it up. I don't need to simplify it. I don't need to talk down to the kids. They want to be challenged. I think they want to have something interesting. At the same time, there's plenty of place for great escapist, fun books as well. Nothing wrong with that. You need a balance. But I haven't really found a massive difference between writing for the two.
Jeff, down here in the middle.
You keep getting that kick.
It's just my books.
Okay.
Books. It's grand.
Your book, The Boy in the Striped Pyjamas, became a film. How much input did you have into the screenplay and the actual making of the film, and how long did it take?
Quite a bit. I didn't write the script. Mark Herman, who directed it, wrote it. But we had a very good relationship from the start, as I did with the producers. And Mark would send me every draft of the script, and I would send back my notes. And I from the very start, I think I was smart enough to know that the way to do this was to, in my email, I would say, love this, and then I'd finish with sort of just a couple of things I wondered about, so that I wasn't trying to take over, and it meant we could work together really, really well. And all these years later, we're still friends, the producers and I are still friends. I was out there on set while it was being made. I was on the US tour with the movie makers and everything, which the novelist doesn't usually get brought on. So I had a fun experience. Bank the check, then you have given them the right to make this, and you don't own it. They can do it. Louis de Bernier has this great line when Captain Corelli's Mandolin was made into a movie that was not a well-received movie, and that somebody had said to him, they ruined your novel, and Louis said, they didn't do anything to my novel. My novel still exists. It may not be a great movie, but my novel is still the novel that it was. So, and I think that's the right way. You get a lot. If they make a good movie, you get a lot of credit as the author, and if they make a bad movie, you don't get any of the blame.
So if Reese Witherspoon came up to you and said she wanted to co-op producing The Elements, how would you feel?
Yeah, I mean, I've got quite a few things
it's quite
in various. I've got quite a few things in various stages of development, and I'm always open for those conversations. And I don't spend a lot of time thinking about them. No. I'm a novelist, 100% primarily. And if somebody wants to take an option on something and for 18 months and see what they can do with it, good luck to them. I'm happy enough for them to go and do it.
Perfect. Okay.
Yeah.
Just here, Jack.
Just a sec.
So like when you're writing such a long book like Hearts and Visible Furies, or the one that you say you're writing now, how do you keep track of all the plot lines and what the characters have done and the date? Have you got a whiteboards?
No,
is it in your head?
It's really just in my head. but a lot of that comes from the rewriting, from the multiple drafts. You know, a book like Hearts of Invisible Furies probably had about 15 drafts. So the first draft is going to be very, very different from the 15th, because stuff happens later on that I wouldn't have known before I started writing it. And so you start to do all the foreshadowing and things. And I always say that I start out a novel thinking it's going to be about this. And then I finish the first draft and I realize, no, it's about this instead, because the story has gone in a completely different direction. But in a way, it doesn't matter if it's 200,000 words or 40,000 words. I somehow just sort of keep it all bubbling up in my head. And maybe because I'm sitting down every day and always working on it, I keep it on its high wire, you know, and seem to be able to control it somehow. But no, I don't have like a wall full of charts and maps and things like that. I don't really do that.
I noticed you mentioned your current novel is much lighter because the previous four have been quite dark, and you were reading from Air, and that had lots of humour in it. I've just this minute finished reading Earth, and there wasn't, it's an excellent book, well written, sparse, there wasn't any of that humour in it. By the way, I was really impressed with the way that you managed to convey so much about sex in that book without actually any of the real nitty-gritty.
Yeah.
It was all there and the atmosphere was there, but there weren't the details that so many people feel they need to put in to get the story across. You managed it without, which was very impressive.
Well, I have no experience.
Do you find with something darker like that it affects your thoughts and your feelings? Does it bring you down, make you dark, make you cynical at all while you're writing it?
Well, it depends which one. Let me put it this way, with Air, with this last one thing I knew when I was going into this, and actually from the very start, I felt I wanted Air to be lighter than the other three, because I wanted the victims, no, not the victim, the survivor story, to be the most positive in a way, that it would be saying to people, actually, you can have this terrible thing happen to you when you're a kid, but you can get through it, you can survive it, it will always be there. Some days that scar tissue will be more sensitive to the touch than other days, but you do not have to let it define your life. So when I was starting this, and because I knew my central characters were the 40-year-old man and the 14-year-old boy, father and son, I thought I can get some humor in here, I can get some lightness in this to just finish it in a way. But to your question, the third book, Fire, that of all the books, not of these four, but of all the books I've ever written, that was the most difficult emotionally for me, because I was writing from the point of view of a child predator. I was keeping that voice in my head for about whatever it was, 7, 8, 9 months as I was writing it, all day, every day. You know, as I go for a walk in the park, you know, I'm thinking about this, where the book's going, and I also knew I still had one more book to write. And there was a point when I was writing Fire where I did feel the weight of this story. I had 2 books already done, one in the middle of, one to come, and you can't spend 2.5 years writing about sexual abuse, child abuse, any type of abuse, without at some point during that period just feeling exhausted, you know, by it, and feeling emotionally drained by it. And it's one of the reasons why when I got to the end, I thought, yeah, now the next thing I'm going to write something completely different. So it does affect you, but in a way, I guess that's the job. And you have to battle your way through and not think about your own feelings, but think about your characters, your story, your theme, the reader, you know, trying to make it authentic, you want your reader to come out at the end of the book having an emotional response to it. And that's more important than my emotional response, I think.
Thank you. You mentioned as well, by the way, about the effect of female abuse on a young boy, and how some people say, oh, but that would be great, what every young boy wants. And I was recently at the Althorpe Literary Festival, and Earls Spencer was talking about his book, which of course is about a female abuse of him. And he said that someone he knows said to him, oh, you lucky old dog, it was, you know, how lucky were you? And that his reaction was, well, maybe I'd have felt like that if I was 17, maybe, but not at 11. It just left me very confused and not really knowing what was going on or who I was.
Well, the
So
reality
that's
is,
pretty much what you said.
the reality is, a minor is a minor. Doesn't matter whether they're a boy or a girl. A minor is a minor, and it's illegal. You can't have sex with a minor. You can only rape them legally. You know,
Right.
I mean, obviously it's illegal, but you know what I mean. You can't have sex with them. There's no consent with a minor. And somebody in Ayr says to Aaron when he's talking about it, oh, you know, just exactly what you just said. You know, wish that had happened. And this is the big scar in his life, and it's not a joke to him. It's not funny, and he's looking at his own 14-year-old son, thinking, how do I protect him from the evils that are out there in the world and the trauma that I went through? And I think it's important to just remember that it's not a joke when boys go through this at the hands of women, any more than than anybody would ever suggest it's a joke when it's the other way around. You know.
Thank you.
Jen, Emma, oh, here.
And then over in the corner.
Following on really from what you've just said, do you need to do any research when you do your books? Do you talk to people? I was thinking of the boy in the striped pyjamas, particularly about the concentration camps, but also these books as well, a very difficult subject.
Yeah, I do. I do the appropriate amounts worth. Say with something like striped pyjamas, that had been a subject I've been interested in since I was about 14 myself. And we didn't study the Holocaust in school in Ireland when I was in school, but I had read I had read Elie Wiesel's book Night, and it had sort of sparked my interest. And so for 15, 16 years, it was a subject I was going back to time and again in my reading, not thinking I was going to write about it, but eventually, I guess all of that reading came together into the idea that led to Striped Pyjamas. With these books, you know, I talked about, you know, my own experience with this subject. I talked to, you know, I went to courtrooms for sentencing hearings. I talked to some psychologists, but I'm also a believer as a fiction writer that you do an appropriate amount, and then you need to put all that away, and you do have to kind of imagine, you know, just what would it be like, you know, like to be the enabler, the complicit one, the perpetrator, the victim, you know, and just use that imagination in the way that an actor would. You know, you've got to put the research aside and not make it feel like it's all copied from non-fiction in some way. I think there was a question over there.
We'll get to you, Emma.
Is there a book you've read that you wish that you had written?
Ooh, good question.
There's 1,000 of them.
Well, what was the last book that you...
well, no, the first one that springs to mind is my favourite novel of all time is The Go-Between by L.P. Hartley. I love that book. And I've written several books where an older, like a very old character is looking back at a moment from youth that has traumatized his or her life. And that is very much what happens in The Go-Between. I have 2 tattoos, and one of them is a literary tattoo. It's the last line of a famous novel, and 10 points to anybody who can guess. We are all terminal cases. Anybody know what that is the last line of? No.
What is it?
Well, the full sentence is, in the world according to Garp, we are all terminal cases. And John Irving is like my favorite writer. So I wish I'd written some of those. Secret History, that's a great book. But I mean, almost every book that impresses me, I wish I'd written. You know, like there's so many great books out there. I'm reading all the time.
Emma?
I think most of my question was already answered. I was going to ask about your research, just as somebody else answered. But I'm really interested when you said as soon as you finish writing a book, immediately you start on to the next one, because when I read a book that I really, really like, I can't start a new book for ages because I'm still thinking about it for days and days. So that's very impressive.
I think it's just like the excitement or something, like knowing that I'm setting out onto a brand new project and new characters, new story. I just find it exciting. Then,
yeah.
You know?
So how does that process look like in terms of you literally want to start writing straight away, or do you go and do some research first and then write, or do it all together, travelling? And
depends on what the book is. most of the books I've written in the first half of my career were more research type books. In the last sort of 10 years, most of the books I've written haven't been those sort of books. They've been just works of imagination books that I could, think up the story. So it would depend a little bit. But I do find that when I'm getting close to the end of a book, like say 2 or 3 months out of the last draft and the copy edits, all of that, that without actively seeking it, there's something in my brain that is kind of starting to jump up and down and suggest what the next story is. And again, without actively looking for it, it starts to build somewhere. And so that like when the day comes, when it's like a Monday morning or something, and I'm saying, right, chapter 1, it was a wet and windy night, that I have some sort of idea in my head that this is going to be something that I can sustain for the next year, 18 months, or whatever it's going to take me to write it.
Thanks.
Okay. Oh, one more.
Oh! So, favourite writer, favourite singer. Wave After Wave, it's from the back of Hands of Love by Kate Bush.
Oh, yes.
And shameless name drop, I'm friends with both John Irving and Kate Bush, so I was able to show them both. So.
Okay, any more questions? Okay, so it just leaves me to say thank you so much.
Oh, thank you.
So much.
Thank
for
you all
your
for coming
time.
as well.
Yeah.
So.
We have lots of copies of the Elements books. Oundle Bookshop very kindly come to bring them so that we could not only talk about them, but we can buy them. And John will be here for some time, not too long, to sign some books should you so wish. So it just one big thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
This is just to show our appreciation.
I'm sure you can hear me. Bob says I've got to use this. We've got our next 2 literary events lined up, and I think I've got most of your details, but if you want to be told the next 2, one is in September and the next one is in next March. We try and do one a quarter if we can. So if you want to come and see our next 2 ladies, which is Lauren Bravo and Georgina Moore, in September, they're coming together, talking together, and then we've got, fingers crossed, Rachel Joyce coming in March. I went to see her a couple of weeks ago and asked her to come, and she's going to get a very good report. Her publicist is going to get a very good report of what a super audience you are. I'm sure John will back that up, and hopefully she'll come. So anyway,
Thank you.